The scent hit me first, metallic and sharp, like copper pennies soaking in rain. Then came the sounds. Labored breathing, barely audible over the forest's whispers, and two tiny mewling cries that seemed impossibly fragile against the vastness of the night. I shouldn't have been there at all. The forest boundary marked the end of what my grandmother called sensible territory, and the beginning of what everyone else in our small town simply called where fools die. I pulled my worn cardigan tighter around my shoulders. October nights in these mountains cut straight to the bone, and the mist rising from the forest floor only made the cold more invasive. My blonde hair, pale as winter wheat and just as unruly, kept blowing across my face, obscuring my vision at the worst possible moments. I tucked it behind my ears for the 100th time, and continued forward, drawn by those sounds, those impossible sounds that shouldn't be here, so deep in the forbidden woods. My flashlight beam trembled across the forest floor, catching on exposed roots and scattered leaves. 3 more steps, and the light finally revealed them. A man, sprawled against the base of an ancient oak. His body curled protectively around 2 tiny bundles, blood soaked through his torn shirt, black in the dim light. The bundles, the source of those heartbreaking cries, moved slightly. Babies. 2 of them. My breath caught in my throat. The ceremonial knife my grandmother had given me on my 16th birthday felt suddenly heavy in my pocket. "Carry it always," she'd whispered, pressing the bone handle into my palm. "Our family protects, even when we cannot fight." I'd rolled my eyes then, thinking it another of her superstitious relics, like the dried herbs hanging from every doorway in our cottage or the salt lines across our thresholds. Now, standing before this broken tableau of father and children, I understood why she'd insisted. The world was full of horrors, even our little corner of it. The man's eyes snapped open as I approached, and I froze. I'd expected pain, fear, perhaps even the clouded gaze of someone crossing into death. Instead, I faced something entirely different, pure, concentrated rage that seemed to burn through the darkness between us. His irises caught the moonlight filtering through the canopy and reflected it back with an amber glow. Not human. Not entirely. Everyone in town whispered about the creatures in the deep forest, with their animal strength and ancient laws. Most believed they were myths, stories to keep children from wandering too far. My grandmother knew better. Our family always had. "Stay back," he growled, his voice barely human. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. I should have run. Any sensible person would have. But the baby's cries had grown weaker, more sporadic, and something in me, something deeper than fear, wouldn't allow retreat. "I can help," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "The children need warmth and milk." His laugh was bitter, cutting. "You know what they are?" "I know they're innocent," I answered. "And dying." A spasm of pain crossed his face, momentarily replacing the rage. He looked down at the bundles in his arms, and something in his expression cracked open. Beneath the fury lay something raw and desperate, love mingled with utter helplessness. "They'll kill them too," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "The council won't allow them to live. My betrayal, my punishment. But they've done nothing." His eyes, fever bright, fixed on me again. "Why would you help? You're human." The question hung between us, and I found myself without a ready answer. Why indeed? This wasn't my fight. These weren't my people. The wise choice, the safe choice, would be to back away slowly and pretend I'd never ventured beyond the boundary. But my grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Our family protects," and the knife in my pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, as if responding to her words across time. "Because I can," I finally said. "Because no one else will." Something changed in his gaze then. Not softening exactly, but a shift, like a predator reassessing. He tried to move and gasped as fresh blood soaked through his shirt. "They tried to execute me," he explained, his words coming in painful bursts. "Traditional way. Wounds that heal slowly. Should have died already. Fighting it. For them." He nodded toward the infants. I knelt beside him, close enough now to see the babies' faces. Tiny, perfect features pinched with cold and hunger. Their eyes were closed, lashes like smudges against pale cheeks. One had a tuft of dark hair, like the man's. The other was bald, with only the suggestion of fair fuzz. "I have a cabin," I said, surprising myself with the offer. "Not far. If you can walk with support, they'll track us," he cut in. "By scent, my blood. My grandmother taught me how to mask scents." The words came automatically. "Herbs and smoke, old ways." His eyes narrowed. "What are you?" "Just human," I replied. "From a family that remembers." He studied me for a long moment before nodding once, a decision made. "Help me up." It took all my strength to support him. He was tall, far taller than I'd realized when he was slumped against the tree, and solid with muscle beneath the torn, bloody clothes. He cradled the babies against his chest with one arm, while I took as much of his weight as I could bear. Each step seemed to cost him, his breathing ragged and harsh against my ear. Twice we stopped, his legs nearly buckling. Twice I thought we wouldn't make it, but we did. My cabin appeared through the trees like a beacon, its windows glowing amber with the light of the fire I'd left burning in the hearth. It wasn't much, just one room with a small kitchen area, a bed, a table, and the fireplace, but it was mine, built by my own hands on the edge of family land. My refuge when the town's whispers about that strange chase girl became too loud. Once inside, I helped him to my bed, taking the babies only when he couldn't hold them any longer. His eyes never left them, even as I laid them on a blanket near the fire and began stripping off their cold, damp clothes. "They need milk," I said, examining them carefully. Both girls, I realized. Twins, perhaps a week old if that. "I have goat's milk. It's not ideal, but it will sustain them," he said weakly. "Temporarily." I worked quickly, warming milk on the stove and feeding the tiny girls with a dropper I used for injured birds. Their hunger was desperate, heartbreaking. Between drops of milk, I stripped the man's shirt away, revealing wounds that made my stomach turn. 5 deep gashes across his torso, each bleeding sluggishly. The pattern was deliberate, ritual. "They used silver," he explained, watching me examine the wounds. "It prevents healing." I nodded as if this made perfect sense, as if I dealt with silver-inflicted ritual wounds every day. "I need to clean these." He didn't flinch as I worked, washing away blood and dirt with water steeped with healing herbs. Only when I began stitching the deepest gash did his jaw tighten, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "You have done this before," he observed. "My grandmother was the closest thing to a doctor this area had," I replied, focusing on my work. "She taught me." "Where is she now?" The needle paused between my fingers. "Gone 3 winters ago." "And your parents?" "Never knew them." The words came out more clipped than I intended. "It was always just us." He fell silent, watching as I continued stitching. When I finished the last wound, I wrapped his torso in clean bandages and helped him drink a tea steeped with willow bark and other herbs from my grandmother's garden. "For pain and fever," I explained. "Though I don't know if it works the same for your kind." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You can say it. Werewolf." The word hung in the air between us, turning the familiar confines of my cabin into something strange and new. I'd known, of course. The amber eyes, the unnatural strength that had allowed him to survive wounds that would have killed a human. The way he'd spoken of the council, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Werewolf," I repeated, testing the weight of it on my tongue. "And the babies?" "My daughters." His voice softened, eyes drifting to where they now slept by the fire. Tiny bellies full, color returning to their cheeks, half-bloods. Their mother was human. I waited for him to continue, but his expression closed like a door slamming shut. "Rest," I said instead. "I need to mask our trail." Outside, the night had deepened, the forest a wall of absolute darkness beyond my small clearing. I worked quickly, burning the mixture of herbs my grandmother had taught me: sage, rosemary, cedar, and things with names too old for modern tongues. The smoke would confuse any nose trying to follow our scent. Next, I scattered a mixture of salt and powdered silver in a wide circle around the cabin. Not enough to harm, but enough to make sensitive noses avoid the area. When I returned, he was watching me from the bed, eyes glittering in the firelight. "What's your name?" he asked. I hesitated. Names had power, another of my grandmother's teachings, but he'd entrusted me with his children, his wounds, his very life. "Emma," I said finally. "Emma Chase." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "River," he replied, "though that's not what my people call me. What do they call you?" His eyes held mine, and for a moment I saw something ancient and wild there, something that made my heart stutter in my chest. "King," he said simply. And with that single word, the world as I knew it shifted beneath my feet. Like the ground itself had tilted on its axis. I had brought home a king, a werewolf king, and his royal daughters, and somewhere out in the darkness, others would be hunting for them. For us. I glanced at the baby sleeping peacefully by the fire, then back at River, who had finally surrendered to exhaustion, his eyes closing as the herbal tea took effect. What had I done? What ancient power struggle had I unwittingly stepped into? The ceremonial knife seemed to burn against my thigh, a reminder of my grandmother's words. "Our family protects." Little had I known how far that protection might need to extend. Outside, the wind changed direction, carrying with it the distant sound of howling. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, my body curled protectively on the rug beside the hearth, never more than an arm's length from the twins. Every creak of the cabin's timber bones had me bolt upright, knife in hand, eyes darting to the windows. The howling had stopped around midnight, but its echo remained, vibrating in my bones like the aftershock of an earthquake. Dawn broke pale and hesitant through the autumn mist. I stoked the fire and checked on my unlikely guests. The babies slept peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronicity. River's condition, however, had deteriorated. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his skin burned beneath my palm. The bandages around his torso were soaked through, not with blood, but with a yellowish fluid that smelled of infection, silver poisoning. My grandmother's journals had mentioned it, how the metal could fester in supernatural flesh, spreading like venom through the bloodstream. "River," I whispered, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, fever bright and unfocused. "Aria," he murmured, reaching for my hand. "You came back." The name sent a pang through me. Aria. The twins' mother? His mate? The longing in his voice was unmistakable, raw with grief and hope. "It's Emma," I corrected gently. "You're in my cabin. Your daughters are safe." Reality crashed back into his expression. His hand dropped away from mine as if burned. "The silver," he said, voice hoarse. "It's in my blood now. I know. I need to draw it out." My grandmother's journals describe a method, but I hesitated. "It will be painful." A humorless laugh escaped him. "More painful than dying while my daughters watch." I didn't answer. Instead, I gathered what I needed. My sharpest knife, a bowl of salted water, candles made from a special black wax, and bundles of dried herbs. The ritual wasn't complex, but it required precision and blood. "I need to reopen the wounds," I explained, lighting the black candles and placing them around the bed in a specific pattern. "The silver has to be drawn out the same way it went in." He nodded once, jaw set. "Do it." I worked methodically, reopening each gash with a clean cut, pressing the wounds until the infected fluid ran freely into the bowl. River didn't make a sound, but the rigid line of his body betrayed his agony. When all 5 wounds were draining, I packed them with a poultice of herbs and wrapped them in fresh bandages. "Why?" he asked as I finished, his voice barely audible. "Why help us when it puts you at risk?" The question caught me off guard. I busied myself cleaning up, avoiding his intense gaze. "My grandmother believed our family had a purpose," I finally said. "A duty to maintain balance between your world and mine." I gestured to the knife I'd used, its handle intricately carved with symbols that matched those on River's ceremonial blade. "This has been passed down through generations of chasewomen, a family of protectors," he murmured, studying me with new interest. "Rare, even in the old days. A small sound interrupted us, one of the twins awakening with a hungry cry. I moved to them, gathering the dark-haired one first. "What are their names?" I asked, preparing the dropper with warm milk. River's expression softened as he watched me tend to his daughter. "They haven't been named yet. Our tradition requires a naming ceremony at the first full moon after birth." His mouth twisted, a ceremony they were denied. I fed the crying baby, marveling at how fiercely she suckled, her tiny fingers curling against my hand. "And their mother?" I asked softly, unable to curb my curiosity. "Arya?" The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the fire crackling in the hearth. When I glanced up, River's face had transformed into a mask of grief so profound, it stole my breath. "Dead," he said flatly. "She died bringing them into this world, another reason they want my daughters destroyed. Half-human offspring born to the Alpha King, whose mate died in childbirth. An ill omen, they said, evidence that I had defied the natural order by choosing a human." My arms tightened instinctively around the baby. "That's barbaric. That's tradition." His voice was bitter. "Our laws haven't changed in centuries. The Alpha King must mate with a werewolf woman of pure lineage. I knew this. Arya knew this. We thought—" He broke off, looking away. "We thought love would be enough, that I could change things from within." The baby in my arms finished feeding, and I moved to burp her, the motion automatic and soothing. What happened instead? Civil war. He gestured weakly to his wounds. "The council elders, led by my uncle, declared me unfit to rule. Those loyal to me fought back. We were outnumbered. My closest guards helped me escape with the twins, but they were killed covering our retreat." His voice roughened. "I should have died with them. Would have if you hadn't found us." The second twin began to cry, and I carefully placed the first beside her father before picking up the fair-haired one. As I fed her, I processed River's words. A king without a kingdom, hunted by his own people, protecting daughters who represented everything his society rejected. "How long will they search for you?" I asked. "Until they find proof of our deaths," he replied grimly. "Or until a new Alpha King is crowned. My uncle, most likely." His expression darkened. Damien would burn the forest to the ground to eliminate any threat to his power. "Then we need to leave," I said decisively. "As soon as you're strong enough to travel." River's eyebrows rose. "We?" I met his gaze steadily. "You'll never make it alone, not with 2 infants and the silver poisoning still in your system. Besides," I added, glancing around my small cabin, "I have nothing keeping me here." The truth of those words settled heavily in my chest. Since my grandmother's death, I'd existed on the fringes of the town, tolerated but never embraced, too strange with my herbs and solitary ways. The cabin, once a refuge, had become a prison of memories and loneliness. "They'll hunt you too," River warned. "Once they discover you've helped me." I shrugged, trying to appear braver than I felt. "Then we'd better not let them discover it." Over the next 3 days, I divided my time between nursing River back to health and caring for the twins. The silver poisoning receded gradually, each day bringing more color to his face and strength to his limbs. By the 3rd night, he was able to sit up and hold his daughters, one nestled in each arm, his expression one of wonder as he studied their perfect features. "They have her eyes," he murmured, looking at the fair-haired twin. "Arya's eyes, blue as summer sky." I smiled, watching them from across the cabin where I packed supplies for our journey. We had decided to leave at dawn. The next town was 2 days' travel on foot, longer with infants and an injured werewolf. But River knew of a safe house there, owned by a pack loyal to him. "We'll need names for them," I said, folding blankets into my pack. "Something to call them besides the twins." River looked up, considering. "In our tradition, only a father can name his daughters, but it is customary for the one who delivers them safely into the world to suggest names for consideration." His eyes met mine. "You saved their lives, Emma. You've earned that right." The honor of it warmed me unexpectedly. I moved closer, studying the babies' faces in the firelight. "This one," I said, touching the dark-haired twin's cheek, "reminds me of twilight, not quite night. but full of mystery and promise. Luna, River said softly. It means moon in the old tongue. Luna, I repeated, tasting the name. It fit her, this solemn-eyed baby with her father's dark hair. And her sister. I studied the fair-haired twin, with her alert blue eyes that seemed to take in everything. She watches the world like she's already planning to conquer it, brave, even now. Sarah, River decided. From Seraphim, the fiercest of angels. Luna and Sarah, I whispered, feeling something shift in the air around us, as if the names themselves held power. Perfect. River nodded, satisfaction in his expression. It wasn't a formal naming ceremony, but something more intimate. A quiet acknowledgement of new beginnings in the midst of chaos. Later, after the twins were asleep and our packs ready for morning, River joined me by the fire. He moved stiffly but with growing confidence, the worst of his wounds healing at last. Tell me about your grandmother, he said, settling beside me on the rug, the woman who taught you our secrets. I poked at the fire, watching sparks rise. Nora Chase. She raised me after my mother disappeared. I was just a baby. I smiled faintly, not much older than Luna and Sarah. She never told me much about my mother, just that she'd gone into the forest one night and never returned. You think she met one of us? I shrugged. Possibly. Grandmother always said the Chase women were drawn to the boundary between worlds. I glanced at him. She taught me everything she knew. Herbs, healing, the old rituals. Said it was my birthright. And the knife? River nodded toward where my ceremonial blade lay beside our packs. That's no ordinary weapon. It's been passed down through generations. Made from a special alloy, silver, but mixed with something else that renders it harmless to your kind when wielded by a Chase woman. I smiled wryly. At least that's what Grandmother claimed. I never had occasion to test it before now. River's eyes gleamed in the firelight. There are stories among my people of human families with gifts, bloodlines that serve as bridges between our worlds. Mediators, healers, protectors. He studied me intently. They're rare now. Most died out or forgot their purpose generations ago. A shiver ran through me. Is that why your uncle wants to kill you? Because you tried to bridge the worlds by loving a human? His expression darkened. Partly. But power is the true motivation. Damien has always resented that I took the throne. I was younger but stronger. The pack chose me. His hands clenched into fists. He's using my love for Arya as an excuse, claiming I've tainted the bloodline. But the twins are your blood heirs. Female heirs, River corrected. In our society, leadership passes to the strongest male. Without sons, my death means a power vacuum, one my uncle is eager to fill. I frowned. That's archaic. A grim smile touched his lips. Many of our ways are. That's what Arya and I hope to change. And now? His eyes drifted to where his daughters slept. Now survival is all that matters. If Damien becomes king, he'll hunt down anyone loyal to me, destroy any evidence that I ever ruled, including my daughters. Then we won't let that happen, I said firmly. Tomorrow, we leave for the safe house. After that, I hesitated, unsure what came next. What role could I possibly play in a werewolf power struggle? River seemed to read my thoughts. After that, you'll be free to go your own way, Emma Chase. You've risked enough for us already. The words were meant to reassure, but they landed like stones in my stomach. The thought of walking away, of never seeing River or the twins again, felt impossible, as if they'd somehow become essential to me in the span of mere days. Before I could respond, a sound froze us both, the distant crack of a branch breaking in the forest. Then another. Footsteps approaching, too heavy to be deer or fox. River's head snapped up, nostrils flaring. They've found us, he whispered, voice tight with fear. Damien's trackers. I moved instantly to the twins, gathering them into my arms as River struggled to his feet. How many? I asked. 3, maybe 4. He inhaled deeply. Armed with silver. My mind raced. We couldn't fight. Not with River still weak and 2 infants to protect. Couldn't run. They'd catch us within minutes. That left only one option, a desperate gamble. The cellar, I whispered, already moving toward the trapdoor hidden beneath my rug. My grandmother built it as a sanctuary. The walls are lined with mountain ash and silver. River flinched. Silver will weaken me further. It's mixed with iron and herbs, designed to mask supernatural presence, not harm it. I shifted both babies to one arm and pulled the heavy door open, revealing narrow stairs descending into darkness. Quickly! As River made his way down, I handed the twins to him one by one, then grabbed our packs and my knife. Outside, the footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by low growls. Just as the first heavy thud landed against my door, I slipped into the cellar and pulled the trapdoor closed above us, sliding the iron bolt into place. Darkness enveloped us completely, broken only by the faint red glow of dying embers in the small iron stove my grandmother had installed years ago. The twins, sensing danger, remained eerily quiet in their father's arms. Above, my cabin door splintered open. The cellar air hung thick with dust, and the sharp scent of protective herbs embedded in the walls. I pressed a finger to my lips, though the gesture was unnecessary. River stood utterly still, his breathing shallow, twins clutched against his chest. Above us, heavy footsteps crossed my cabin floor, followed by the crash of overturning furniture and breaking glass. "Spread out," a deep voice commanded. "The scent trail ends here. They can't be far." "The fire's still warm," another replied. "Fresh milk on the table. They left in a hurry." A third voice, lower and more refined than the others: "Search everything. Damien wants the king's body and the abominations." River's arms tightened around his daughters at the word. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. I moved closer, one hand resting on the knife at my hip, the other curling around River's forearm in silent support. For nearly an hour, we remained frozen as the intruders tore my cabin apart overhead. I winced with each crash, each shattered memento of my grandmother's legacy, but kept my eyes fixed on River. His strength amazed me, still recovering from near-fatal wounds, yet standing without trembling, protecting his children with unwavering focus. Finally, the voices grew frustrated. "Nothing, not even a trail to follow. The protective circle's outside. Someone knows our ways. A human ally. We'll burn it," the refined voice decided. "If they're hiding nearby, smoke will drive them out." My heart stuttered. I'd prepared for many contingencies, but not this, not flames that would consume my grandmother's home, the only place I'd ever belonged. River must have seen the horror in my eyes, for his hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I swallowed hard. "Just things," I forced myself to say. "We're alive. That's what matters." The scent of smoke filtered through the floorboards moments later, followed by the unmistakable crackling of fire catching dry wood. The cellar would protect us from the flames. My grandmother had built it to withstand forest fires, but soon oxygen would grow scarce. "There's a tunnel," I whispered, reluctantly pulling my hand from River's. "My grandmother's escape route. It leads to a cave near the stream, half a mile away." I moved to the far corner of the cellar, feeling along the rough stone wall until I found the hidden latch. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a narrow earthen passage barely tall enough for River to navigate with a crouch. "I'll go first," I said, lighting a small oil lamp I kept by the entrance. "The tunnel branches twice. Easy to get lost if you don't know the way." River nodded grimly, adjusting the twins in his arms. Luna had begun to fuss, perhaps sensing the danger or responding to the acrid smoke now seeping into our sanctuary. "Hurry," he urged. "They'll check the perimeter once the fire has done its work." The tunnel was just as I remembered from childhood explorations. Damp, close, with roots dangling from the packed earth ceiling and occasional supports of ancient timber. I led the way with the flickering lamp, glancing back often to ensure River managed the awkward journey with his precious cargo. "My grandmother built this during the Boundary Wars," I explained, keeping my voice low. "When humans first settled here, there were conflicts with your kind." "I know the history," River replied. "The chase name appears in our oldest records. Peacekeepers, when few wanted peace." The information surprised me. My grandmother had never mentioned our family appearing in werewolf histories. What else had she kept from me? After what seemed like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upward. Fresh air whispered through a crack ahead, carrying the scent of pine and moving water. I extinguished the lamp before pushing open the camouflaged door, a slab of rock balanced on a hidden pivot point. Moonlight spilled into the tunnel, painting River's exhausted face in silver as he emerged behind me. We stood at the mouth of a small cave, concealed by a tangle of vines and ferns, the stream gurgling just yards away through the trees. Behind us, a distant orange glow lit the night sky, my cabin, my life, burning to ash. "We need to move," River said, his voice rough with sympathy and urgency. "They'll search this area next." I nodded numbly, unable to tear my eyes from that distant glow. Everything I owned, everything I had of my grandmother, her journals, her medicines, the portrait of her that had hung beside the hearth, gone. Grief rose sharp in my throat, but I forced it down. Later, I would mourn later. "The town is that way," I said, pointing north. "But they'll expect that. We should head deeper into the forest. Circle around to reach the road on the far side." River studied me, concern evident even in the dim light. "You know these woods well, better than most." I shouldered my pack, grateful I'd had the foresight to prepare it earlier. My grandmother made sure of that. We moved through the forest like ghosts, careful to leave minimal signs of our passage. River, despite his injuries and the twins, kept pace with surprising grace. His night vision proved invaluable, allowing us to navigate without light that might betray our position. The babies remained miraculously quiet, as if sensing the need for silence. Occasionally, Sarah would whimper softly, and I would pause to help River feed her a few drops of milk from the small supply I'd packed. Luna watched these proceedings with solemn eyes that seemed too aware for a newborn. Near dawn, we reached a ridgeline overlooking a narrow dirt road that wound through the valley below. River sank down against a boulder, exhaustion finally claiming him. The twins had fallen asleep, tiny faces peaceful against his chest. "We'll rest here until nightfall," he decided. "Less chance of being spotted in darkness." I nodded, dropping my pack and easing down beside him. Now that we'd stopped moving, the reality of our situation crashed over me. Homeless, hunted, fleeing with a wounded werewolf king and his infant daughters. My body trembled with delayed shock, teeth chattering despite the mild autumn morning. Without a word, River shifted closer, draping his arm around my shoulders. The heat of him was startling. Werewolves ran hotter than humans, apparently. I should have pulled away, maintained some boundary between helper and helped. Instead, I found myself leaning into his warmth, my head coming to rest against his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice rumbling beneath my ear, "for bringing this destruction to your door." "You didn't choose to be hunted," I replied, watching the first golden rays of sunlight creep across the valley, "and I chose to help." "Why?" The question held genuine curiosity. Most humans would have left us to die. I considered the question, searching for an answer that made sense. "Maybe I'm not most humans," I finally said. "Or maybe I know what it's like to be an outsider. To be feared for being different." River was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice held a gentleness I hadn't heard before. In our old stories, there were humans who could walk between worlds, those who understood both human and wolf. Bridgewalkers, my people called them. Rare, even then. His arm tightened slightly around my shoulders. "I think you might be one, Emma Chase." The words settled over me like a mantle, strangely comfortable in their weight. Bridgewalker. It explained the inexplicable pull I'd felt toward the forest boundary all my life, the knowledge my grandmother had passed down, that seemed to come from somewhere beyond human experience. "If I am," I said softly, "I'm the last. My grandmother was the only family I had. And now—" I swallowed hard, unable to finish the thought. River's hand found mine in the growing light. "Not the last," he corrected. "Not anymore." I looked up. startled by the implication, and found his amber eyes studying me with an intensity that sent heat flooding my cheeks. For a breathless moment, something electric passed between us. Something that had nothing to do with gratitude or obligation. The moment shattered as Luna stirred, her tiny face scrunching before she let out a hungry cry. I pulled away quickly, grateful for the interruption. "I'll heat some milk," I said, digging through my pack for the small cooking pot I'd brought. "We all need food before we rest." While River soothed Luna, I gathered kindling for a small, nearly smokeless fire. Another of my grandmother's teachings. As I worked, I fought to regain my equilibrium. Whatever I'd felt in that moment with River was dangerous, a complication we couldn't afford. He was a king in exile, still grieving his lost mate. I was a human with no home and no family, and we were both focused on one priority: keeping Luna and Sarah safe. Everything else was irrelevant. By mid-morning, we had eaten a simple meal of bread, dried meat, and berries I'd gathered from nearby bushes. The twins had been fed, changed, and now slept soundly in a nest of blankets beneath the shade of a pine. River's wounds needed tending, so I carefully removed the bandages, relieved to find the infection retreating, new skin forming along the edges of each gash. "Your healing ability is returning," I observed, applying fresh herbal salve. "The silver is finally leaving your system." He nodded, watching my hands as they worked across his torso. "Thanks to you." After a pause, he added, "You never asked how I became king." The non sequitur surprised me. "I assumed you were born to it, inherited the throne." A wry smile twisted his lips. "Not quite. Among my kind, leadership isn't passed through bloodlines alone. Strength matters. When the old king, my father, died, I had to fight for the crown." His expression darkened. My uncle expected to win. He was older, more experienced. But I was faster, stronger. "And now he wants revenge," I concluded, securing the fresh bandages. "More than revenge. He wants to erase everything I've built." River's voice grew passionate. "In the 3 years I ruled, I began changing things, modernizing our laws, creating alliances with other packs, even building tentative bridges to the human world. Damien would undo it all, return us to isolation and the old brutal ways." I sat back on my heels, studying him. "You loved her very much, Arya." His eyes met mine, unflinching. "Yes. She was human, but she understood our world better than many born to it. A diplomat's daughter, raised in many cultures. She believed, as I do, that isolation has weakened us. And now I fight for her daughters, for the future she wanted for them." He looked toward the sleeping twins, a future where they aren't hated for their mixed blood, where they can choose their own paths. The raw determination in his voice moved something deep within me. This wasn't just a father protecting his children. This was a king with a vision, a man willing to challenge centuries of tradition for what he believed right. "I'll help you get there," I found myself promising. "To your safe house, to your loyal pack, whatever it takes." His eyes returned to mine, searching. "It will be dangerous. Damien won't stop." "I'm already involved," I pointed out. "My home is ashes, and I hesitated, then pushed forward with the truth. "I need purpose, River. Since my grandmother died, I've been existing, not living. This, helping you, protecting the twins, it matters." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. "Among my people, saving a life creates a bond. You saved 3. By our oldest laws, that makes you family." The word, family, struck like a physical blow, dredging up years of loneliness in its wake. Family was what I'd lost when my grandmother died, what I'd never had with the mother who abandoned me. To hear it offered so simply, as if it were already truth, left me speechless. River's hand reached out, tucking a strand of pale hair behind my ear. The gesture was gentle, almost casual, yet it sent awareness sparking along my skin. "Rest," he said. "I'll keep watch." I should have argued. He needed recovery more than I did. But exhaustion pulled at me like an undertow, my body finally registering the night's trauma. Arranging myself on the ground near the twins, I used my pack as a pillow and closed my eyes. Just before sleep claimed me, I felt something settle over my shoulders. River's jacket, still warm from his body, carrying his scent of pine and wild things. A smile touched my lips as darkness swept me under. I woke to twilight and danger. River's hand covered my mouth, his eyes alert and focused on the road below. I followed his gaze and saw them. 3 figures moving along the dirt track, noses lifted to the wind. Even from this distance, there was something unnatural in their movements, too fluid and predatory to be human. Trackers, River breathed against my ear. Different ones. Damien is casting a wide net. I nodded my understanding, and he removed his hand. The twins were awake but quiet, as if sensing the tension in the air. I gathered our belongings silently while River checked his wounds, testing his mobility. "Can you fight if needed?" I whispered. His expression was grim. "Not at full strength, but yes." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." I shouldered my pack and lifted Sarah into my arms while River took Luna. "We need to move deeper into the forest before crossing the road. There's an old ranger station 2 miles north. We can shelter there tonight." River nodded, and we retreated from the ridgeline, moving with painful slowness to avoid snapping branches or rustling leaves. The forest darkened around us as night fell in earnest, the first stars appearing overhead. I led the way, grateful for my grandmother's insistence that I memorize these woods like my own reflection. Behind us, a howl rose into the night, long, mournful, and unmistakably triumphant. They had found our scent. "Run!" River's command cut through the stillness, urgent but controlled. We abandoned stealth for speed, plunging through the underbrush as more howls joined the first, closer now and converging. I clutched Sarah against my chest, her tiny body trembling as we fled. My heart pounded painfully, legs burning as we tore through the darkness. River moved ahead, Luna secure in one arm while his other hand cleared our path, breaking branches and shoving aside obstacles. "The stream," I gasped, veering right. "If we cross, the water will mask our scent." We splashed through the icy current, the shock of cold water stealing my breath. On the far bank, River paused, listening intently. The howls had stopped, a worse sign than their continuation. It meant the trackers had switched to silent hunting mode, saving breath for the final chase. "The ranger station?" River asked, voice tight with urgency. I shook my head. "Too obvious. There's a cave system nearby. My grandmother showed me. Hidden entrance." Without waiting for response, I led the way, scrambling up a steep embankment that most would overlook. Near the top, concealed by a curtain of vines, a narrow opening split the rock face. I pushed through, River following close behind. The interior opened into a modest chamber, dry and surprisingly warm. Ancient paintings covered the walls, crude images of wolves and humans, some depicted with hands joined. "A sacred place," River breathed, recognition in his voice. "From the time of the first treaties." "My grandmother called it the meeting place," I replied, setting Sarah down gently to light the small lantern from my pack. "Said it was neutral ground, protected by old magic." River studied the paintings, shifting Luna to his shoulder. "Your grandmother knew more than she told you, Emma." "So it seems." I arranged blankets for the twins, creating a makeshift bed. Once they were settled, I turned to River, whose expression had grown alarmingly grim. "What is it?" "They'll find us, even here," he said quietly. "Damien's trackers are the best, and there's only one exit." The reality of our situation crashed over me. We were cornered, trapped with 2 infants and no reinforcements. River was stronger, but nowhere near full capacity. And what could I offer against werewolf trackers trained to kill? My hand found the ceremonial knife at my hip, its weight suddenly significant. My grandmother had a saying, "When cornered, become the corner." A ghost of a smile touched River's lips. Cryptic. She was fond of riddles. I moved to the cave entrance, studying it. "But I think I understand now. We can't run anymore. So we fight, on our terms, not theirs." River's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting an ambush." "I'm suggesting we use what we have." I gestured to the cave paintings. "Neutral ground, protected by old magic. My knife, passed through generations of boundary keepers. Your royal blood. The twins, living proof that humans and werewolves can create something beautiful together. Understanding dawned in his eyes. A summoning of the old covenant, I nodded, though I was piecing together fragments of my grandmother's teachings, making intuitive leaps. If we're lucky, it might buy us time. If not, I met his gaze steadily. At least we'll face them with dignity. For a moment, River studied me with an expression I couldn't decipher, something between wonder and wariness. Then he nodded once. Tell me what to do. We worked quickly, arranging the cave according to the ritual patterns depicted in the wall paintings. I placed the twins at the center of a circle drawn with crushed herbs and salt from my pack. River took position before them, guardian and father. I stood at his shoulder, knife drawn, its blade catching the lantern light. Outside, the forest had gone deathly quiet. They were close. Remember, I whispered, whatever happens, protect the twins. They're what matters. River's hand caught mine, squeezing once. You matter too, Emma Chase. Before I could respond, shadows darkened the cave entrance. 3 figures materialized from the night, moving with inhuman grace. The leader stepped forward, tall, aristocratic, with silver threading his dark hair and coldness radiating from his pale eyes. Even without introduction, I knew him instantly. Damien, River's uncle, the would-be king, nephew, he greeted, voice smooth as polished stone. How disappointing to find you still breathing. Uncle. River's reply was equally measured, betraying none of the pain I knew still plagued him. How predictable to find you still plotting. Damien's gaze shifted to the twins, disgust twisting his features. The abominations live as well, a situation easily remedied. His eyes finally landed on me, narrowing with interest. And what have we here? A human ally? How characteristic of your misguided rule. I felt River tense beside me, but kept my own expression neutral. Everything depended on timing now. You stand on sacred ground, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Neutral territory established in the first covenant. Violence here breaks the oldest of our shared laws. Surprise flickered across Damien's face before his expression hardened. Human, you speak of laws you cannot understand. This is pack business. It's boundary business, I countered, raising my knife so the markings on its blade caught the light. I am Emma Chase, last daughter of the boundary keepers. By ancient right, I claim protection for these children and their father. A low murmur passed between Damien's companions. Recognition, perhaps even unease. The old stories weren't entirely forgotten, it seemed. Damien, however, merely laughed. Boundary keepers? Those human families died out generations ago. Your knife is a poor forgery, your claim meaningless. He stepped forward, teeth elongating slightly with his growing anger. Stand aside, or die with them. I held my ground, heart hammering. The knife will prove my lineage. With deliberate movements, I sliced my palm, letting blood well up and drip onto the cave floor. The effect was instantaneous. The crimson drops didn't land, but hovered inches above the stone, suspended as if time itself had paused. Gasps echoed through the cave. Even Damien stepped back, his certainty visibly shaken. Blood of the covenant, River murmured behind me, awe evident in his tone. I moved forward, knife extended. By ancient law, I demand trial by council. These children are under my protection until judgment can be rendered by a full gathering of the packs. It was a desperate gamble, pieced together from half-remembered tales my grandmother had shared. I had no idea if such a council still existed, or if the old laws held any power over modern werewolves. Damien's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. You dare invoke council law? A human? A boundary keeper, I corrected, whose authority in such matters was established when the first treaties were written. I gestured to the cave paintings surrounding us. Or have you forgotten your own history, would-be king? The title, or lack thereof, struck a nerve. Damien's composure cracked, a growl rumbling from his chest. Clever words won't save you, human, or my nephew's half-breed spawn. Perhaps not, came a new voice from the cave entrance. But I believe mine might carry some weight. All heads turned as a figure stepped into the lantern light, an elderly woman leaning on an ornately carved staff, her silver hair bound in a complex braid. Though small in stature, she carried herself with undeniable authority. The reaction from the werewolves was immediate. Damien's companions dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Elder Thea, Damien acknowledged, noticeably less confident. This is an unexpected honor. I'm sure, she replied dryly, moving further into the cave. Her sharp eyes assessed the scene before landing on me. So, the last Chase daughter has found her purpose at last. Your grandmother would be proud. I stared, speechless. This woman knew my grandmother? Elder Thea turned to River, who had moved to stand protectively beside me. Young king, it seems you've survived Damien's treachery. Good. The balance has been disturbed enough already. Damien stepped forward. Elder, you cannot possibly support this abomination of our laws. He mated with a human. The children, Thea interrupted sharply, are innocent, and according to the old laws, under the protection of a boundary keeper. She nodded toward me. The human has invoked council law correctly, Damien. Even you cannot deny the blood ritual. My suspended blood drops still hovered, now glowing faintly in the dim light. Elder Thea approached, examining them with knowing eyes. Pure lineage, she murmured, remarkable after so many generations. She turned back to Damien. The council will convene at the next full moon. Until then, King River and his daughters remain under Chase protection. That is my ruling as first elder. The authority in her voice was absolute. Damien's face contorted with barely controlled rage, but he didn't dare challenge her directly. The council may rule differently, he warned. They may, Thea agreed calmly, but they will rule fairly, without your interference. She fixed him with a steely gaze. Return to the territory, Damien, your trackers as well. Any further action against the king or his children before the council meets will be considered high treason. For a tense moment, I thought Damien might attack despite the elder's presence. Instead, he offered a stiff bow, as the first elder commands. His cold eyes found mine once more. Until the full moon, human. With that, he retreated into the night, his companions following silently. Elder Thea waited until their footsteps faded, before turning to us with a weary sigh. Well, that buys us 2 weeks at most. You know my grandmother? I said, still trying to process everything that had happened. A smile softened her weathered face. Nora and I were old friends. Though we met rarely in recent years, the boundary between our worlds grew complicated. She moved to where the twins lay, studying them with gentle curiosity. They're beautiful, River. Arya would have been proud. River bowed his head. Thank you, Elder. You knew his mate, too? I asked, surprised. I know many things, child, Thea straightened, suddenly businesslike. But there's little time for history lessons. Damien will abide by my ruling, but he won't stop plotting. The council is divided on many issues. The future of the Pax, integration versus isolation, and most critically, your claim to the throne, she added, looking at River. What happens now? I asked, wrapping a cloth around my cut palm. Now, Thea replied. We get you all somewhere truly safe until the council convenes. She studied me thoughtfully. You've chosen a difficult path, Emma Chase. Standing with him means standing against many powerful werewolves who fear change. I glanced at River, who watched me with an intensity that sent warmth coursing through my veins, then to the twins sleeping peacefully despite the danger that had so nearly claimed them. I've made my choice, I said simply. Thea nodded, approval in her eyes. Then we have much to do before the full moon rises. Elder Thea led us through moonlit forest paths that appeared and disappeared like shifting dreams. We traveled until dawn, the twins remarkably quiet in our arms, as if sensing the gravity of our journey. Finally, we reached a clearing where a modest cabin stood, smoke curling from its chimney. My sanctuary, Thea explained, ushering us inside. protected by wards even older than those in the sacred cave. Damien's trackers won't find you here. The interior was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the austere elder who had faced down River's uncle with such authority. Herbs hung from rafters, books lined rough-hewn shelves, and the air smelled of pine and something sweeter, like honey and cloves. You live between worlds, I observed, noting symbols carved into the doorframes. Some I recognized from my grandmother's teachings, others entirely foreign, as did your grandmother, though she chose to lean more toward the human side in her later years. Thea gestured for us to sit at a worn wooden table. After your mother disappeared, Nora became cautious. The casual mention of my mother sent a jolt through me. You knew her too? My mother? Thea's expression softened. Lily Chase. Brilliant, headstrong, much like you appear to be. She busied herself preparing tea, avoiding my gaze. She wasn't content with boundaries, wanted to understand both worlds completely. What happened to her? I asked, the question I'd carried my entire life finally finding voice. Thea and River exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Thea suggested gently. After you've rested. You've all had a difficult journey, though frustration burned in my chest. I nodded. The twins needed attention, and exhaustion pulled at my limbs like weights. Thea showed us to a small bedroom with a crib large enough for both babies, and a bed that River immediately insisted I take. I'll keep watch, he said, his tone brooking no argument. Too tired to protest, I helped settle the twins in their crib before collapsing onto the bed. Sleep claimed me instantly, deep and dreamless. I woke to afternoon sunlight and the soft murmur of voices. Following the sound, I found River and Thea at the kitchen table, heads bent over ancient-looking maps and documents. Between them sat my ceremonial knife, gleaming as if recently polished. The council will challenge her lineage, River was saying. We need proof beyond the blood ritual. The records in the archive would suffice, Thea replied. But reaching them, she trailed off, noticing my presence. Emma, you've rested well? I nodded, joining them at the table. The twins? Fed and changed, River assured me. They're sleeping again. I studied the documents spread before them. Genealogies, treaties, maps of territories I'd never seen on any official chart. You're planning for the council meeting, trying to, Thea confirmed. Damien will have prepared his arguments carefully. He'll claim River abandoned his duties, violated sacred mating laws, and produced heirs that threaten werewolf bloodlines. All false, River growled. Truth matters less than perception, Thea countered. Many on the council fear change. Damien offers them comfortable tradition. Even if that tradition is based on isolation and prejudice, I traced the edge of one yellowed map. And what do we offer? Thea smiled approvingly at my use of we, a vision of adaptation, controlled, careful bridge building between worlds that have grown too separate. She studied me thoughtfully, with a boundary keeper to help maintain balance. The weight of responsibility settled over me. I know almost nothing about being a boundary keeper. My grandmother taught me herbs and healing, rituals and stories, but never explained my true heritage. She sought to protect you, Thea said gently. After Lily vanished, Nora feared the same fate might befall you if you stepped too deeply into our world. And now? I pressed. What happens if the council rules against River? Against the twins? A heavy silence fell. River's eyes met mine, grief and determination warring in their amber depths. If that happens, he said quietly, we run. Find a place far from werewolf territories. Start over. The simplicity of his answer, the complete abandonment of his birthright, his kingdom, struck me deeply. For his daughters, he would give up everything. There's another option, Thea said carefully. One your grandmother never told you about, Emma. A right of boundary keepers rarely invoked. I raised an eyebrow. Which is? Champion's right. A boundary keeper may stand as champion for those under their protection. If the council rules against River, you could challenge that ruling through ritual combat. Your victory would override their decision. River's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Emma isn't fighting anyone. It wouldn't necessarily be physical combat, Thea clarified. The challenger chooses the form, riddles, tests of endurance, trials of wisdom, but still dangerous. No, River repeated firmly. We're not risking Emma's life. Shouldn't that be my decision? I asked, surprised by the steel in my own voice. River's expression softened. Emma, you've already risked everything for us. I won't ask more. You didn't ask. I'm offering. I turned to Thea. What would it mean? Becoming a true boundary keeper. The elder's eyes gleamed with approval. It would mean standing between worlds, belonging fully to neither. Mediating disputes, upholding ancient covenants, protecting the balance. She paused. It can be a lonely path. I thought of my cabin, now ashes. Of the town where I'd never truly belonged. Of my grandmother, who had lived her life on the edge of two worlds, neither fully embracing her. Then I looked at River, this fierce, wounded king who had defied his people's oldest laws for love. At the twins, innocent and perfect in their mingled heritage. Something unfamiliar stirred in my chest. Not belonging exactly, but purpose, connection. I'll do what's necessary, I said simply. But first, I need to understand my heritage completely. No more half-truths or protected ignorance. Thea nodded. Fair enough. Your mother didn't disappear, Emma. She crossed over. Crossed over? I repeated, confused. She fell in love with a werewolf. Against all traditions, against her own mother's warnings, she chose his world over yours. Thea's eyes held mine steadily. She lives still, in the Northern Territory, with her mate and their children. Your half-siblings. The revelation struck like lightning, reforming everything I thought I knew about myself. My mother, alive, with a family that didn't include me. Why didn't she take me with her? The question emerged small, childlike. You were fully human, Thea explained gently, born before she met her mate. The Northern Territory laws were strict. No humans permitted, even children. She had to choose, and she had chosen her new family. The pain of that knowledge cut deep, but beneath it lay something else. Understanding. My grandmother's protectiveness, her insistence that I learn the old ways while keeping my distance from the boundary. She had feared I would follow my mother's path, disappear into a world where I might never truly belong. River's hand found mine beneath the table, a silent offering of support. Does she know I'm alive? I asked. That I grew up with her mother? Yes, Thea confirmed. Nora sent messages through me occasionally. Lily couldn't respond without risking exposure, but she received them. I absorbed this, uncertain how to feel. Abandoned, yes, but also connected to a wider story than I had ever imagined. The Northern Alpha, River said suddenly, straightening. He's on the council. If Lily's mate is from that territory, her mate is the Northern Alpha's brother, Thea confirmed, a smile playing at her lips. Which means, Emma, you have an uncle on the council. One who might be persuaded to support his human niece, and the progressive king she protects. For the first time since we'd fled my burning cabin, hope flickered to life. Can you reach him before the council meets? Better, Thea replied. We can bring him here, along with someone else who might prove useful in swaying council opinion. Her eyes twinkled. Your mother. The days that followed passed in a blur of preparation. Thea sent messages through channels I didn't understand, while River and I focused on caring for the twins and strengthening his healing body. Between feedings and changing diapers, Thea taught me the formal rituals and protocols of a boundary keeper, knowledge my grandmother had withheld out of love and fear. River, too, became my teacher, explaining werewolf customs and hierarchy with patience and occasional humor. We fell into an easy rhythm, passing the twins between us, finishing each other's sentences, moving around each other in Thea's small cabin, as if we'd done so for years instead of days. Sometimes I would catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name, something beyond gratitude or friendship. In those moments, heat would rise to my cheeks, and I would busy myself with some task, avoiding the implications of that gaze. He was still grieving Arya. The twins still needed a safe future, and I was still finding my footing in this new reality, where boundaries between worlds seemed increasingly permeable. One evening, A week after our arrival, I stood outside Thea's cabin watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The twins were asleep. River was helping Thea prepare dinner, and I had slipped out seeking a moment of quiet to process everything. "You're troubled." River's voice came from behind me, followed by his presence at my side, solid and reassuring. I smiled faintly, just overwhelmed. A week ago, I was a strange hermit living alone in the woods. Now I'm a boundary keeper with werewolf relatives, preparing to address a council of supernatural beings. "Regretting your choices?" he asked, voice careful. "No," I answered honestly. "Just adjusting." We stood in comfortable silence, watching darkness claim the forest. In the distance, a lone wolf howled. An ordinary wolf, River assured me with a smile, not one of his kind. "Emma," he said finally, turning to face me. "Whatever happens at the council meeting, I want you to know." A rustling from the trees cut him off. We both tensed, but Thea's voice called out from the cabin doorway. "It's all right. They've arrived." From the forest emerged 3 figures: Thea, who had apparently slipped out while we were talking, and 2 strangers. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of authority similar to River's. The woman... My heart stuttered. Even in the fading light, I could see my own features reflected in her face. The same pale hair, the same slight build, the same determined chin. She had aged since the single faded photograph my grandmother had kept. But there was no mistaking her. Lily Chase. My mother. She stopped several paces away, uncertainty written in every line of her body. "Emma," she breathed, the name falling from her lips like a prayer. 23 years of absence stretched between us, an ocean of unasked questions and unspoken hurts. I had imagined this moment countless times growing up, dreamed of what I might say if given the chance. In the end, I said nothing. I simply closed the distance between us and did what my heart had longed for since I was old enough to understand what mother meant. I wrapped my arms around her and held on. Her arms encircled me instantly, her body trembling with silent sobs. "My daughter," she whispered against my hair. "My beautiful daughter." Later, there would be explanations and apologies. There would be introductions to the uncle I never knew I had, and discussions of council politics and alliance building. There would be strategies formed and risks assessed. But in that moment, standing in my mother's embrace with River watching silently from the cabin porch, I understood what Thea had meant about the loneliness of a boundary keeper's path. It wasn't about isolation. It was about choice. The choice to stand between worlds, to build bridges rather than walls, to find belonging not in one place, but in the connections we forge across divides. 2 nights later, under the full moon's glow, I stood before the Werewolf High Council as the first recognized boundary keeper in generations. River stood at my side, his strength fully returned, the twins cradled in the arms of my newly discovered mother. Damien's arguments fell flat against our united front: the exiled king, the human champion with royal werewolf relatives, the elders' testimony, and most powerfully, the twins themselves. Luna and Sarah, perfect in their dual heritage, living proof that the future need not be bound by the prejudices of the past. When the council ruled in River's favor, restoring his throne and recognizing his daughters as legitimate heirs, Damien's rage erupted in a challenge. Not to River, but to me. "The human has bewitched you all," he snarled. "I invoke the right of challenge against the so-called boundary keeper." A hush fell over the gathered werewolves. As the challenged party, I had the right to choose the form of combat. "I accept," I said calmly, "and I choose the trial of blood memory." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The trial was ancient, dangerous, a ritual where both participants allowed ancestral memories to flow between them, exposing truths that no lies could conceal. For a werewolf like Damien, those memories stretched back centuries. For me, they contained the wisdom and experiences of generations of boundary keepers. It was brutal, disorienting. Damien's memories flooding my consciousness, his ancestors' hatred and fear washing through me like acid. But my lineage carried its own power. the quiet strength of women who had stood at boundaries, who had chosen protection over prejudice, who had loved across divides when it would have been easier to build walls. When it ended, Damien lay unconscious, overcome by the weight of truths his hatred couldn't withstand. I remained standing, though barely, supported by River's steady arm around my waist. "The challenge is met," Elder Thea announced. "The council's ruling stands." In the aftermath, as werewolves dispersed and new alliances formed, River drew me away from the crowd into a quiet grove of ancient pines. "You could have died," he said, anger and admiration warring in his voice. "But I didn't," I pointed out with a tired smile. "And now your daughters have a future. Your throne is secure." "Our daughters," he corrected softly. At my startled look, he continued, "If you're willing. They need a mother, Emma. Someone to teach them how to navigate both worlds they belong to." He paused, uncertainty flickering across his features. "And I find that I need you," my heart stuttered. "River, Arya will always be their birth mother," he finished. "Will always be my first love." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. But she believed in building bridges, in finding connection across boundaries. And I think, his voice grew softer still, I think she would approve of the bridge we've begun to build. "A werewolf king and a human boundary keeper," I said, testing the impossible shape of it. "The council might accept your daughters, but this, us, would be another challenge entirely." "I'm not afraid of challenges," River replied, his free hand rising to trace the curve of my cheek. "Not with you standing beside me." In his eyes, I saw not just desire or gratitude, but recognition of shared purpose, shared strength, shared vision, something deeper than conventional love, rooted in the ground we'd traversed together. "Neither am I whispered, and rose on tiptoe to meet his kiss. Overhead, the full moon bathed us in silver light, neither fully of his world nor mine, but something new and precious. A boundary crossed, a bridge built, a future reimagined. In the weeks and months that followed, River reclaimed his throne with me at his side, not as queen, not yet, but as official boundary keeper, the first in generations to be acknowledged by both human and werewolf authorities. The twins grew stronger daily, beloved by packs who had initially feared their mixed heritage, but now saw in them the promise of a more integrated future. My mother remained with us often, healing the wounds of our long separation, and introducing me to half-siblings who accepted me with curiosity and warmth. My grandmother's journals, rescued from the ashes of my cabin by Thea's foresight, became the foundation for a new archive of boundary knowledge. And River and I, we built our bridge carefully, stone by stone, each day learning more of each other, each night discovering new ways our worlds could intersect and strengthen rather than oppose. On the twins' first birthday, beneath an oak tree that marked the boundary between territories, River and I completed the ancient bonding ritual that made us mates in the eyes of his people, partners in the eyes of mine. Luna and Sarah, now toddling on unsteady legs, watched with solemn eyes as we pledged to stand together, not just for them, not just for our peoples, but for the simple, revolutionary truth that love could transcend boundaries. "Our family protects," I whispered, echoing my grandmother's words as I slid a ring onto River's finger. "And our family builds," he added, completing the thought as he placed its twin on mine. "Bridges, not walls. Connection, not division. A future where no child would be called abomination for carrying the blood of both worlds in their veins. It wouldn't be easy." Damien's supporters still lurked in shadows. Traditionalists still whispered of contamination. Humans still feared what they didn't understand. But as I stood surrounded by my impossible family, werewolf mate, half-blood daughters, long-lost mother, allies who had become friends, I knew we had already won the most important victory. We had found each other, rejected and wounded, across an ancient divide, and in that finding, we had begun to heal not just ourselves, but the boundary itself.